Hey everyone, it's Michelle and welcome back to my meadow. Today I wanted to share with you some of the techniques and things that we are trying to reduce the pests and the critters from getting into our garden and messing with our fruits and vegetables that we're trying to grow. Not only do we have to deal with the kinds of things that would like to eat your food, like your cucumbers and your squash and your brassicas, we also have woodland critters and even some feral cats that we take care of. So we want to do things that keep the cats out of the gardens. We want to do our best to reduce the squirrels, raccoons, possums from eating the merchandise we're growing, and even keep the birds off of the berries and things like that. So I'm going to take a trip around the garden with you and show you some of the things that we're doing to try to keep a little more of the produce that we're growing without using chemicals to get rid of the pests that we have. Now, I'm not saying I've never used a chemical in the garden, and I'm not saying I never will use a chemical, but when I can avoid it, I really do try. Let's take a look. If you've watched any of my other videos, you've already seen this one, but it's hoops and netting. And in this case, we don't have the bed fully sealed, but we have it mostly sealed to discourage the cats and discourage squirrels and to discourage birds, and it will also discourage the moths and butterflies that would like to lay in here. Yet the holes in the netting is large enough for the bees and other micro-pollinators to get through and do their job and help out in here. The next thing I try is polyculture. I don't put too many of any one item in a single bed. So here in this bed we have bok choy, tomatoes, peppers, wasabi radish, daikon radish, tomatoes, kale. So there's not a plethora of any single kind of fruit or vegetables that could be a banquet for a group of pests. Now here's one thing that nature does for us. We try to encourage habitat that encourages the lizards and frogs so they can assist us should we have some pest pressure in the garden. And I often find where something has been munching, but it is no longer there and it does not completely destroy it. So we're working on some symbiosis as well in the garden. Next, we try succession planting. Now this is a doubly good technique. One, we are getting harvest at different times, and two, perhaps we can get plants growing at times when the pest pressure might be different. In this case, we have corn over here to the right, and if I zoom in here, I can see that the next round of corn is just starting to sprout through the seedling straw. And when the seedlings are small, we often see snail pressure on them. Often I don't worry about the snails because they do take care of a lot of the dead and dying things, but the seedlings are sort of tender and hard to resist. So for this, I like to sprinkle in crushed eggshells and spent coffee grounds. I have read that the coffee grounds, the caffeine in them, deter the snails and that they don't like crawling over the eggshells. Typically when I've just planted, I will sprinkle it around, but if I forget, I'll come back later and add them like I'll do today for these cucumber seedlings and for the corn that is now popping up. I have a couple of these square frames that I can use as a trellis, or sometimes I just lay across the bed until we finish planting it out and putting the straw in. In this case, it is just chicken wire over a cheap 1x2 piece of lumber that I made a frame for, and it just allows me to discourage the cats and other things from digging down in the garden. Now this is something I sort of hesitate showing you because I don't have any clear indication that it's doing everything I need it to do. But in this case, I used cardboard to shut off access to this bed for the cats, and that's my biggest concern over here. And it won't stay in. I have this, I keep tucking it behind the edging, but it won't stay in place, so I've almost given up on this. But the other thing I noticed is this bed does not get a whole lot of sun yet this year, and the squash that's over here is not thriving. And so I don't know if it's a lack of sun or if it's with the cardboard on there, it's just not getting all of the things it might normally get if it just had a nice mulching. So time will tell. The jury is still out on using cardboard as a mulch in a garden bed. I have used cardboard as a mulch in a container just to help reduce the loss of water, and it worked beautifully. One of the things that we learned in our nectarine tree last year is that the birds also like the nectarine. This is like a little wedding favor bag, and what we do is we just simply open the bag and then slide it up over the fruit and then pull the little drawstrings, try to get it as high and close to the top as possible. And a few days later, I can see the bags are working. Nothing is picking at the fruit, and bonus, when it is ripe and it falls to the ground, it's already packaged in a little gift bag for you. Now, I know you're looking at this broccoli and going, now Michelle, it doesn't look like you've done a very good job with this one. Well, actually, I have let the aphids take this one over, and I'm using it like a trap plant because almost nothing else in this entire garden bed has any kind of pest pressure on it. Again, we're using polyculture, but I've also tried something else. In some cases, people think of companion planting. I haven't done it quite that seriously, but I did use store-bought onions. Yes, that's right. Store-bought onions, organic when I could. I cut the greens off and I came and planted them in the garden. So these really big ones you see here, and anytime we walk down this bed you see some really big ones. These are onions I bought at the store and I put in the garden bed. Now the interesting thing in this garden bed down here, if you've seen one of my other videos, I haven't been super happy with the success of the bed because the soil has been letting the water just run through and not soak in. Having the mulch on for a couple of weeks, things are really getting better over here. I know people say don't plant onions with other stuff, there's concerns, but I have to tell you, I don't see it affecting the growth of the other plants, and I just don't see a whole lot of pest pressure over here. Now, it does not keep the cats from wanting to get into this particular bed, but I will say, I've also noticed that in the beds where I have the thicker mulch, the cats are not visiting and doing their business. In this bed, we're using the netting a little differently. I've kind of made fence posts and we're using it around the edges to discourage the cats from laying in this bed. And also, I'm not as worried about them using the potty here, but what they like to do in this bed is get in here and chase the lizards and then tear up the plants. And so since I've started this little fencing around this bed, I don't have that kind of damage from the cats. This is something new I am trying this year. The first 2 years with blueberries, we had to give about half of them to the birds because they were getting them before they got ripe. I see now I'm starting to get a few ripe ones on, but this is just a laundry basket from IKEA. And all we've done is turn it upside down over the blueberries. At this point, I don't have to worry about pollinators. I don't have to worry about anything. I'm just keeping them watered well so we can start harvesting. And when we're ready to eat some blueberries, we can simply lift these off and then replace them as the season goes on. Now, down below, we couldn't reach all of them, but I'm not worried about sharing some of the blueberries with the birds because while we don't always think about it, the birds are also hunting for other pests in our garden. And so there is some balance and symbiosis here that we have to think about. Now in the greenhouse, which we have to leave open at this time of year, and really it should be down and done, but shoulder surgery and all kept that from happening. This is the place we've had the most pest pressure. And we did none of the things that we've talked about in the other beds. These tomatoes were overwintered, but they're also jumbled in here together. This was all tomatoes in here. I had tomatoes inside of this greenhouse. And the way that I managed the pests in here were to simply pick them off. So I would come through each morning and I would inspect the plants as I began seeing some gifts, LOL, scat, poop down here, I would then start looking up in the plants to find the caterpillars and worms that were doing the business here. Interestingly enough, I haven't seen any hornworms this year. These were army caterpillars and other things eating them up. The next case is the Napa cabbage, which has been effectively eaten by the snails. And in this case, I use water just to wash them off. As often as I come in here to water, I then spray them down and shoot the snails off. I've also been known to gather the snails out of a garden bed. In fact, the garden bed that we looked at that I used the fence on, I gathered 50 or 60 snails by hand and set them free in other parts of the yard. And so sometimes it's a matter of just taking things into your own hands. One more thing I hope to try this year, but I've not tried yet, is making cages. So in this case, I have a winter melon that I expect will get a couple of feet long. I am going to take some chicken wire and form a mesh cage to put around it to discourage the raccoons and squirrels or possums from coming by and taking a bite out of it. In the past, they got our cantaloupes, and I don't want that to happen with our winter melons. So, in the comments below, tell me which of these things would work for you. And if you have ideas of other ways that we can keep out the pests, I would love to hear them. I continue testing ideas. I want to try things so that I can keep as much of my produce as possible, but I recognize that it's a symbiotic relationship. You know, we can't exist without nature. We can't exist without these other animals. We have to figure out a way to work together so that we can reduce our impact on them and hopefully help them reduce their impact on us. I appreciate you watching. If you liked this video and you want to know more about what's happening in the meadow, please give it a thumbs up to like it and subscribe to the channel. And you can always click that bell notification in order to be notified whenever we upload new videos that may be of interest to you. Until next time, my friends, please wear your sunscreen and drink plenty of water. Have a fantastic day.